So do you enjoy the content here on Thoughtful Faith? If so, be sure to hit the notification bell. This ensures that our new videos show up on your feed. Also, be sure to check out our Facebook group called Thoughtful Saints, where myself and others discuss the sorts of topics found on this channel. And lastly, if you think other people would benefit from this video, please be sure to share it. Hey everyone, thanks for joining me on this episode of Still Brothers. In this program, I have conversations with my atheist brother, Forrest, who runs the channel Latter-day Skeptic. His channel focuses on critiques of the church and religious belief generally. In the end, we may disagree, but we recognize that we are still brothers. And I think that is the secret ingredient for navigating faith differences. I hope you enjoy today's episode. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's show. Tonight, I am joined by the Latter-day Skeptic, my brother, Forrest Hansen. Forrest, how you doing?
Good. Excited to be back.
Good. Nice.
Let's talk about another one.
Let's get into this. So in these videos, Forrest and I offer critiques of each other's video. One of us plays the role of the critic, offering the critique, and the other one plays the role of the apologist, defending maybe some of their ideas. But we try and do this in a way where we steel man each other's arguments and really try and allow each other to lay out the best version of each other's arguments. And then instead of trying to convince one another, our main goal is clarity, to clarify where our distinctions are and the different ways that we view things. So that's what we're going to attempt tonight. So tonight we're going to be going into one of my videos. So I'm playing the apologist and Forrest is going to be the critic. And let's get into it. Forrest, take it away.
Cool. Yeah, I think we're good just to hop into that first clip.
Cool. All right. Let's pull up a clip here. This was you want to do the interview that I had with Chris Hanna?
Yep. And it was fun. Me and Chris had a good discussion in the comment section, and then we had a good discussion on his podcast as well.
Awesome. Very cool.
So I hashed out a few things with him.
Let's go to the clip. What timestamp are we at?
48:48. And then
right.
play it to about 50:51.
Okay, 48. Here we go.
Yeah, 48 and 48 seconds. It's probably right about the spot.
Okay, come forward a little more. This is probably close enough. Here we go. I'll mute my mic. Oh, okay. But if we're going to define God along the same lines as the Trinitarian Christians, remember, you're talking about a spaceless, timeless, immutable, prime mover, genderless, three persons in one. It is such a incomprehensible load of woo-woo, for lack of a better term, that it is, Plato, it sounds like Plato. Plato is very much this sort of idea of the forms and this sort of.
It sounds a lot like Islam too. If you ever get far into Islam, the Sikhs. That's how the Sikhs view stuff. It's even just if you get like the random people who declare themselves Gnostics or Hermetics or any sort of thing like that. But
See, well, I guess my point, just real quick, is that Jordan Peterson fits into that same mold.
Yeah, 100%.
It's the exact same mold. We actually, as Latter-day Saints, we're not. We break that mold big time. We are not idealists. We fall much more under what would almost be
realism. It's almost like this is happening in the real realm of realism. Yeah.
Yeah, and they give us hell for that. And
that's probably good there.
Frankly, I think that's oh, sorry. I was just saying that just to give the audience a quick notification about this episode with Chris. We were talking in this part, especially about Jordan Peterson's notion of God, and specifically how he fits the mold maybe of a Platonist. But anyway, you want to go ahead and kind of give your thoughts?
Actually funny, of it? So one of my first videos that I put out was basically saying Jordan Peterson is an atheist. And that was brought up in the video. And then the issue was this definition of God kept getting interesting. So you guys, the seal man of what you guys were saying was basically that people tend to think that Jordan Peterson has this woo-woo made up definition of God, and that he's just getting soft on the definition. But in reality, he has the same, the omnipresent, the Trinitarian definition of God is very much up that alley. So it's actually nothing new. St. Thomas Aquinas had this very same woo-woo, which I think is its whole thing, but you said it. So like woo-woo definition of God. So Jordan Peterson is not this new, I like to say, like postmodern language using religious type. He's actually very standard throughout like Christian history.
Yeah. So that's a fairly accurate Steelman. The only thing I might add to it is obviously Jordan Peterson is not the exact same as Thomas Aquinas, and that he doesn't, hold to the hypostatic union of the Trinity and three persons in one and all that kind of stuff. But fundamentally, that sort of which I believe is an incoherent notion itself. So what happens is any coherent notion of God that they might try and make that makes God personal falls apart. And so their version of God ultimately ends up being Aristotle and Plato's God, which is the same sort of a notion of God that Peterson is embracing.
So I want to dig in a little bit on some of the details, but just broadly speaking, I think something that happened throughout the whole conversation that you had with Chris is you allow a redefinition of God all the time, which is fine, but you don't do a redefinition of atheism. You're not accounting for, like, when Forrest was saying Jordan Peterson isn't an atheist, this is what Forrest is using for atheism and what Forrest is using for a belief in God. And so, like, if an atheist, for example, says God doesn't exist, the Christian God of the Bible doesn't exist, and then you say, so therefore Jordan Peterson is an atheist, and you say, no, he is an atheist, he believes in Neoplatonism. Or did I say he is not an atheist because he believes in some form of God? It's like we're talking past each other at that point, because you're letting this definition of God be super fluid, which is challenging. And this is where the claim of, like, you guys are moving the goalpost all the time. And I had a big argument with Chris. Like, what do you think atheists are arguing about? Do you think they're arguing about? I just looked up a video on Spinoza's definition of God, where it's like very, the universe and nature. It's like, do you think Sam Harris and Hitchens are arguing against Neoplatonism?
Well, that's to a certain extent, you get into the same problem that I have with a lot of people, other theists that I deal with. Like, here's the nice thing. When it comes to Latter-day Saints, you can be like, Jordan Peterson is an atheist by your standards. And I would say, yeah, he does not believe in the kind of God that we believe in, at least not yet. Well, let's hope that changes.
And so that's kind of like this overarching issue. But even once you dive into the nitty gritty, I think both you and Chris were avoiding the obvious issues with what you guys are saying, which is at some point, this Neoplatonistic definition of God interacts with the real world in Christianity. So does Jordan Peterson believe that Jesus was literally resurrected? Does he believe that Jesus had miracles? Does he believe in any of those truth claims that I'm assuming Thomas Aquinas actually believed in?
Yeah, no, he doesn't.
So those different definitions are important.
Let's do this. Would you say that Aristotle was an atheist?
I would say, what is your this is one of my questions, what is your definition of God?
That is exact. Now you're getting to it.
Okay, all right, we're getting to it, but like, actually, what do you?
I'll give you mine.
For our own clarity.
My definition of God. When I use the term God, what am I describing? I am describing the Father, a being in the universe who is the same species as myself, in some sort of a higher exalted form, who ultimately organized and created the cosmos. But I would also say this, that question that you're asking is literally the thing that theists are all debating amongst ourselves. Like, that is the great debate of theists. What in the heck is this notion of a higher power? What does it come down to? And the Christian will disagree with me. People within the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints will have disagreements about what they mean when they're saying God based on the characteristics of who God is. And so it's the question to ask anyone when they talk about God is, what are you describing with the word God? And what you will find often is that, and this is one of the things that bugs me about kind of classical theists and a lot of the Christian world, they give me an answer that's totally incomprehensible and
I agree.
It's just garbage. They're not describing anything, and so I don't even know what to say to them.
So, and the reason this is an issue is because, so there's, in individual conversations, we can define our terms. That's good. But there is a somewhat universal conception of God that's colloquial that most people understand. And additionally, there's a definition of atheism that most people understand.
It gets the colloquial. That's one of the problems. The colloquial definition is often.
I can give you a colloquial definition that's so broad that. No, but I can give you a broad one that we could agree on. We don't need the details. Power, we could say a higher power that interacts with the world, maybe.
Yeah, or a higher power that.
Well, let's actually let's just say the Christian God, because let's say you're an atheist going after Christianity. What if someone in reference to Christianity says, I'm an atheist? What God are they not believing in?
Yeah, they're not believing in the person who rose from the dead 2,000 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. So I think,
and Jordan Peterson absolutely does not believe, from what I can tell, in the literal resurrection of Jesus Christ, which in my opinion is a prerequisite for anyone calling themselves a Christian. If you do not believe that Jesus Christ literally rose from the dead in bodily form, then you are not a Christian. Like, period.
So, and then the other part of it is also the definition of religion that comes up. Because it gets kind of used, and even Chris is using it, you're using it of like, oh, you're religious too. And from my understanding, the way you guys are using it is, there's kind of two pieces. A, do you have something at the high or at the top of your value structure? And two, is it unjustified? Do you have faith in it? Is it an unjustified assumption? Is that how you guys are using the word religious when you say like an atheist is religious?
So when I use the term religion, I'm using the term as to describe the structure of a person's, how do I even describe it? I'm using it to describe the way a person acts in the world in relation to their value hierarchy.
Like that's where I would say, like, and you guys brought it up, like it's impossible to not be religious, and then it makes the word just a useless term.
No, but I think it actually is a very useful term. I like to define it in that way, because when I define religion as that, because I don't see a meaningful difference between I have a particular set of beliefs that result in a value that justify. I guess I'll put it this way. A religion is a set of beliefs that attempts to justify your value structure. That's what I say. The narratives that you utilize to justify your value
I mean, I understand that, and as much as I don't like the idea, like I understand it. I think you guys are dodging by not including some supernatural aspect.
So here's the thing about supernatural. If you're going to apply that, the problem is that if you apply supernatural, like that has to have supernatural to,
or a claim about the afterlife. How about that? Like, I think claims about the afterlife are religious in nature.
Are essential to a religion?
Yeah, I think so. Like, it's hard to talk about a religion that doesn't have a claim about an afterlife, unless you start talking about like any belief system that has. Like, I think that's a more accurate definition of like what people are. Why are we even using a word to describe this? We're trying to like differentiate between different ideas, and one of them.
Yeah, and that's where I actually have a hard time. Honestly, when the problem is that when you look at somebody like Aristotle's view of God and the resulting value structure that sort of comes from idealist philosophy, the lines between what constitutes religion and what doesn't gets rather hazy. Plus, I don't really care if a person's belief system is like, to some extent, religions get put into a category that then get discriminated against. Okay. It's like, oh, keep your religion out of this. Right. When it's kind of like, wait a minute, why does your worldview get to be inculcated into schools or whatever, but mine doesn't? And it's like, well, because or you could even flip it around. You could say, well, it's my religious beliefs give me special protection under the law. Right. Well, why does
what is a religious belief? My religious belief is whatever I want to do.
Exactly. And so there's sort of, in my opinion, it actually solves both those problems, because it just sort of says, look, everybody has a value structure that has some sort of a narrative to justify it. And so that the common thing that I'm seeing in all of these things is that if you want to say that religion,
your definition causes those problems.
Causes what problems?
Like if you have no definition of religion that somewhat has to do with some supreme being giving you divine commands, like that's where you get someone that says, oh, well, my religion is I don't have to go to school.
Oh, no, that's not a problem. Like, I think you should be free to not go to school. I'm saying is that I don't think that someone can say, well, I abuse my children and that's my religious belief.
Well,
and therefore...
You're saying people should not be able to say that?
Yeah, I don't.
Well, then, and that's my point. Is like your definition of religion is so loose that if their highest value is abusing their children, then that's their religion.
Yeah, and I think that's a terrible religion. I don't think religion.
I just don't think it's a religion. I think when we talk about freedom of religion and having religious exemptions, we clearly mean, hey, there's these people that believe that God is telling them things. It's really a deep down belief that they have, and it's key to them living a good life. We need to take that into consideration.
I would say within the context of constitutional interpretation, you have to go and look at what did the founders mean when they were talking about religion at that time. At that time, the concept of religion was very much, it was Christianity primarily, and then Judaism and the few religions that they kind of knew of and what they would have thought of in terms of religion. And most people still do, but it depends on the context of the conversation. Okay. When we're talking about religion in relation to constitutional law, I actually do believe that it should refer in law to the way it was understood by those who wrote the law, what they actually intended by it. However, when I'm talking about religion, or when you're talking about religion, if you're just talking about superstitious beliefs, like, yeah, I'm against religion. Like, religion's terrible.
Well, I mean, you're not. You have you don't. Well, do you think your beliefs are superstitious?
No.
Like, what is this? We're gonna get into a definition. I actually want to bring up one point before we get on to the second clip, because we need to get moving.
Yeah.
I'm more just going to throw it out there as kind of like I actually think I'm going to do a video on it, because the last couple of days it's like hit me big time, and I think it's maybe there's something to it. And it comes from your guys' comments about atheists having unjustified beliefs at the bottom of their, it's kind of funny. I think you and Chris were talking top or bottom. He would always say the bottom, like the foundation, and you were talking like the highest. Anyways, like an unjustified foundation. You say atheists, you dig down in all of their beliefs or in all of their worldviews, they will come to a foundation that they can't justify, and so they have faith in it. So it acts as a religion. And I want to dive into the idea of an unjustified belief versus an unjustified assumption versus a false assumption. Because I think that's where an atheist would say, sure, I can't prove mine, but I can prove that yours is false, so we need to find a new foundation.
Okay.
So, yeah, I think it's an interesting topic. So it's not just saying, hey, we both have things we can't prove. It's like, no, we've proven yours false. This is obviously like, this is what I would say to a believer.
Yeah.
That's why we're different. We're different not because we both can't justify our stuff. It's that your stuff is false. And not that it's unjustified.
Yeah, anything that's false, I'll reject.
Yeah.
I'm all for that.
Because I
And
don't,
frankly, that's the other thing to keep in mind. One of the things I actually don't like defending quote unquote religion, because I actually believe that most other religions are false, and are based on all sorts of bad things. But then again, I mean that both in terms of religion 1.0, which is kind of what you normally talk about, and religion 2.0. I believe that most
2.0
totalizing worldview.
Oh, wait, you're saying 2.0 as in stage 2 conversation?
No, I mean religion 2.0 in the sense of like the broader definition, the kind of all worldviews sort of religion, right? But yeah, I'm not a fan of religion per se. I'm a fan of things that are true. And I believe that certain religions 2.0 kind of worldviews are more true than others. And I believe that humanists oftentimes have more truth in their humanism than religious zealots, religion 1.0 zealots, who are just out of their freaking minds based on irrational and insane beliefs. So I do not like to lump in I'm not a defender of quote unquote religion as just per se, because although I will say I do believe that most, well, I don't know. It's kind of a mixed bag. It kind of depends on how much the type of humanism a person has. Because if they have a collective Marxian humanism, it's like burn it. Like I'm gonna fight against you tooth and nail and send armies and the whole 9 yards. And if you're but if you're a different kind of humanist, you might be great. So it really is dependent on the particular views. I don't care about these labels. I care about what is true, what is false, what set of beliefs has more truth in it or less. That's it.
The only reason I really bring it up is it seems like a lot of that conversation, it's maybe false equivocation is the right word. Like Sam Harris believes that he's an atheist, but he has these beliefs too that are unjustified. It's like, yeah, but that's because you're using one definition of atheism that obviously is not what he intended. I think it's obvious. Chris, when I talked to him in the chat, like he actually does think like, wait, the new atheist movement, like, or the Four Horsemen, like weren't going after atheism or theism 2.0, is that what you called it? Like the broad. I'm like, no, I don't think so. I think they were going after anyone that says God interacted with the world through Jesus or God interacted in the world through Muhammad. Like those are all the claims that they seem to attack from my perspective.
Well, you kind of cut out there for a second, Forrest. You were saying the Four Horsemen of the New Atheists?
Yeah, I think
like they aren't.
So I think that they were going after truth claims where God interacted with the world. That kind of a God, I think you call it 1.0. And it seems like sometimes you guys will laugh at them thinking, you guys are hypocrites. You talked about not believing in God, but yet you do have a hierarchy of values. And you do have faith in your fundamental premise or your fundamental assumption. And it's like, yeah, that's because when they were talking about atheism, they're talking about 1.0.
If they're just going after false superstitions, I'll be right there with them. I think the problem is that they paint with too broad of a brush and want to go after any sort of belief system out there that holds up
any kind of religious truth claim of God interacting with the world.
Yeah,
that's what they go after.
Fair enough.
But that's different than a value structure.
But the problem is that the value structures depend on something higher. I would argue, as the presuppositionalists do, that Sam Harris can't make sense of the world without certain presuppositions.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Of course, yeah, we have if you went why to all of his beliefs, you get to the bottom and you'd have an unjustified assumption.
Yep.
But he's not claiming that he doesn't.
But the thing is that those assumptions can be justified in a Christian worldview more plausibly than he can. That's what I would argue.
You'd have to see my video. I think that religion doesn't answer any of those questions. It's also an infinite regress. It doesn't solve the foundational or the pyramid of foundational knowledge or whatever. Like you guys don't have a foundation that's unjustified.
Well, then we're gonna have to we'll have to do a video on that one. Let's go on to the next clip.
All right. Next clip is at 37 minutes 30 seconds. And it's kind of short. Yeah, just a 30. I'll stop you.
Yeah, no worries. No worries. Let me pull this back up. What did you say? It was at 30 what?
37:30.
Oh, yeah. I was listening to their conversation. I was kind of almost frustrated listening to it because I couldn't help but be like, dude, yeah, you prefer that everyone leave each other alone and that we all have our own little like areas that we all kind of do our own thing. We all leave each other alone and live the lifestyles we want. That's arbitrary. What if my value system is, no, I'm going to go and take over the world and I'm going to dominate all of you guys. And I'm going to take all the resources. I'm going to kill every one of you. And I'm going to enslave you all. And I'm just going to, leave it for me and do what's best for me and my tribe. Right. And my thing is I don't see how anyone gets around that problem, because if it is just power and preference, then we are just in a Hobbesian nightmare. And I think that Foucault,
that's good there.
And this is where I'm actually all right.
All right.
Thoughts
So I'll
on
start
that?
with the Steel Man. Basically, if without God, it's all that you can really see is that there's power and preference. And then if you desire a certain thing and you want it and you have the power to get it, there's nothing stopping you. And then we live in a Hobbesian nightmare, and that's just the way the world would be.
Yeah. I think when you take away the concept of any sort of a cosmic justice, all that you're left with is us. And I would say me. I'm left with me, and I have things that I want, and then I either have the power to get it or I don't. And I'm in a world full of people that are just like that. Their highest good is well-being, meaning rationally, I think your individual, like my well-being, is the most important. And so everything in life is a means to the end of me getting well-being, which is what I ultimately want. That's my preference. And then power is just the way that I go about getting that.
So you had posed a question. You said, like, what if the world is just power and preference, and you wanted to go conquer the other tribe and take all the resources? Like, what's stopping you or something? Is that not the exact world we live in? Because you're posing it as in, like, you're afraid if this thing didn't exist, then we'd live in this horrible world where people could just conquer.
No, I believe that is the world that we live in. And I believe that, but the world that we live in isn't the full extent of reality. I believe what's missing from that equation is ultimate cosmic justice. So,
yes, but I agree. So, but what I'm saying is your fear of the Hobbesian nightmare is basically an irrational fear, because that's the world we live in. It's already here.
Oh no!
If someone wants to come and take your stuff, you have to be ready for that. That's the Hobbesian nightmare you already live in, regardless of if there's a God. So taking away God doesn't create this new problem. Taking away God leaves us exactly where we were from square one.
No. Taking away God leaves away any possibility of redemption. That's the Christian message. The Christian message doesn't deny that we're in a fallen world that's unjust and basically is just power and preference. The Christian message is the gospel, the good news. The good news is that all accounts are settled and that you don't get away with anything, and that ultimately all of our well-being is interconnected, and that...
Okay, so you agree that we live in a world of power and preference?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
What I'm saying, though, is that
was mostly my point. My point is there's nothing to be... there's not like this new thing you need to be afraid of that might happen.
I'd say it is the most terrifying thing in the entire world. I think that if there's no hope, no redemption, no justice, that is the worst possible thing ever. In fact, I'm so rough on this of how bad the world actually is. I'm a believer that we should end it all. If there's no redemption and there's no anything, then overall, if you look at just the overall suffering of every creature and all of it, the suffering doesn't outweigh that. It's like, for the vast majority of humans, the vast majority of living creatures, life will be mostly suffering and then death. And it's like, I don't think existence justifies itself. I think it'd be better if none of it existed. I just did an episode of the Midnight Mormons talking about this very thing.
Yeah. Well, no, I think you just talked about it with somebody else too.
Yeah, I mean, redemption.
With Chris, you talked about it.
With Chris, yeah. And so the thing, my bigger question is, I turn to the atheists and I go, so this is it, huh? Like, it's all just power and preference, and Foucault's right. And that ultimately, what that means is that Foucault is right. He's right.
I don't know enough about Foucault, but like, to me, this is such a confusing statement because
all of everything is about power. Okay, like the language we use and preference. There is no. The only morality is get what you want, because that's well-being. The only well-being you're going to get is your own. And so now he may not have said it in those words, but that's sort of.
That's kind of. I mean, I somewhat agree with a lot of that. Like, I think you have power but this is, you make this leap to like end it all. It's like a totally confusing belief, because it's. I don't know how you get from point A to B. We don't really need to go down that much, but it's like, I enjoy living, so at a minimum, I wouldn't want to end myself.
Yeah.
Why would you end all the good things?
No, I agree. From an individual perspective, you could have a wonderful, wonderful life that you feel like is totally justified. But the question is if you were to objectively pull back and look at the whole thing and say, okay,
is there an option for making it all better and happy, and so there's lots of joy?
No. What I'm saying is that if you knew that the entirety of existence was.
No,
I'll use this example.
The past existence or the future existence?
All of it.
If I knew all of it was mostly suffering, then yeah, I'd probably say at the end it probably wasn't worth it. We should have not existed at all. That would have been better.
Yeah, and that's my basic point.
But if you can have a net positive,
I don't think it's possible. I don't think it's even close to possible with how bad things have been in human history, and in the history of life generally. I think if you were to add up the suffering, any of the good that came out of it wouldn't justify it. But that's a very different discussion that would.
Yeah, that's a very different discussion too.
It would have to go into. But yeah, do I concede that this world is a world of power and preference? Absolutely. I believe that the world is a Hobbesian nightmare, and I think that the serious atheists recognize that, and they adjust their moral compass in a way that takes account for that. And I
think that's what Sam Harris does, for example. He is arguing for a better world because that is his preference, and he's using his power to try to get what he wants. He wants a better world. Yeah, I never said it wasn't arbitrary, but that doesn't matter.
Well, then why do I care what he has to say? I don't prefer.
Because if he can convince you, then it worked. And you are now, your want is in line with his wants.
What's like his wants are the product of being in a Christian culture.
I mean, perhaps. Like, what I thought was kind of ironic about the whole conversation too is it's so the power and preference is so unavoidable, especially for somebody like Chris. And I feel bad, Chris, if you watch this video, we can have our own conversation, so I don't keep just bringing you up. But like Chris, who doesn't believe, for him to be advocating for religion, that is a power preference move big time. He's like, I want the world to be a better place. I want things to be happier. And I'm going to try to use my power to try to influence that. And I think that's what religions are doing too. Like, you're trying to influence the world.
No, see, this is the total difference. The difference is we say all power belongs to God. And if you prefer your own well-being, you better align with him, because ultimately he's the one who has the power and that ultimately rules all things, right? It's not us. So that's one of the big differences in the worldview. Regardless, I concede that point. So anyway, I know we want to do a little bit shorter one. Any other? I'll give you the final word on it.
Nope, that's all I got.
All righty.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Chris, if you're watching this, you and Forrest have to connect. I actually would love to see a conversation between you two.
That'd be fun.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, everyone. Hope you all have a good night.
Thanks a lot.
Hey, if you enjoyed this episode and want to try to improve your engagement with those you disagree with, I want to share with you a few of the principles that Forrest and I try to abide in these conversations. First, We try to steelman each other's perspective before offering a critique. We make sure that the other person feels that we have not misrepresented their point of view. When you are not addressing the actual argument the other person is making, you just end up talking past each other. Second, we seek clarity, not consensus. We are trying to understand the nature of our disagreement and clarify the distinctions between our different points of view by comparing and contrasting the different ways we justify our position. Instead of the discussion being about winning an argument, it's about two people curiously exploring how they arrived at their different conclusions. And third, just things as simple as defining your terms can do immense good in conversation. So often people talk past each other simply because the words they are using are vague or can mean different things to different people. Much conflict comes not because of disagreement, but simply because of confused language and misunderstanding. In the end, our shared goal in these discussions is not just to engage with each other on a variety of topics, but hopefully to model how people with wildly different opinions can engage meaningfully. Do we always succeed? Of course not. But we hope that to some extent, we can be part of the solution in bridging the gaps between people of different opinions.